Are we really facing a housing crisis? Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee and let me ask you the question. Are we really facing a housing crisis? Is housing out of the reach of the average Aussie family? Well, let's look at a few things. Now, what's brought this to why I want to discuss it is this article that we see here from news.com.au, written by Alex Turner Cohen. Bleak map paints a depressing picture of how the average families can't afford to live in Sydney. Well, let's look at this because I've got a few, bones to pick with the way this has been framed. And we see it again and again and again in the media to paint a picture that we have a housing crisis. Now, I would make the argument that housing is unaffordable in Australia. It's very expensive. But, is that a crisis, or is that just a sign of our changing society? Because, some of the old measures people do, like comparing a single income to the cost of a house, is outdated. How many of you know families with a single income household? How many of you know two-income households? Me growing up in the 80s, it was becoming more and more common where families had two incomes. Women have been liberated. Feminism has pushed women into the workforce so they can pay for or demand childcare subsidies for the government to take care of their kids if they choose to have them, and then pay taxes working for someone else. I think we're kind of all screwed because it's driven up the cost of everything. So let's look at this here. So, Sydney's essential workers are locked out of living in the communities they serve as the housing affordability crisis reaches unprecedented levels in the New South Wales capital. That's according to a new report from the Property Council of Australia's New South Wales Division, released on Sunday, which concluded that the landscape is essentially bleak for teachers, nurses, police officers, childcare workers, and public servants who should be able to live in the areas they work. Well, true, they should be. But here's the thing, guys. You can't have a single income household anymore. Okay? You can't have a single income household anymore. You need two people earning at least the average income. Anything less than that, you're below average. Not only is the dream of owning a home beyond hope for most, but the ability to rent in those areas is also virtually impossible, with rental vacancy rates across the Greater Sydney area remaining at a critical low of 1.6%, the report found. See, here's the thing. I'd make the argument that this is showing you that our quality of living is going down. It's going down, everyone. New South Wales Property Council executive Katie Stevenson dubbed the report's findings depressing and called for the fast tracking of housing projects in the state. Will it make a difference, though? You can't fast track out of this, with our population growth continuing to grow. Are you going to be able to catch up, let alone surpass the growth rate of our population to put downward pressure on housing? No, it's not going to happen, everyone. The building approvals are just not there. We're not hitting the targets. Labor's promise of 1 million homes, everyone in the industry knew that was rubbish. It was just not feasible. It takes building a house, building an apartment is a very complicated process. I looked at the comments to my video yesterday. Bludger's not willing to work for $25 an hour. Some idiot made a comment going, it takes 3 months to become a master in anything. No, some of these projects can take years to do. And you need several of them to become a master at them. If you're working as an engineer, a designer, or a builder, or even a tradie on them, it can take a long time. That's skills you need to learn and experience you need to get. So, I can see why they're calling for fast-tracking housing projects. That's what we need. We need to make it easier to build. We need to make it easier to develop. But the challenge is, are we going to be able to outpace that population growth? There'll be calls for people to put limits on immigration and people coming to the country. It's not going to happen. You've got too many vested political groups that are interested in ensuring that flow of people to Australia is maintained. Look at the university sector, everyone. Look at the tourism sector. And they're powerful groups. She also called for a serious review of the government's extra costs imposed on homeowners. Well, yeah, I mean, what do we have here? Now we've got 7-star energy rating requirements in Queensland. I don't think the masses understand that any cost you impose on a landlord, it gets imposed on a renter. You think the fact that now we have to have yearly smoke detector checks, is it yearly or what is it? It seems often enough. Do you think that's not imposed on the renter? And people are going, oh, well, it's good for your Sicherheit, for your safety. I guess, this is the society we're living here in Australia, everyone. It's always for ihre Sicherheit, every time, rather than individual responsibility or putting the risk onto the individual. We don't want that. We don't like that here in Australia. People go on a current affair. People complain. People go to the government when they've made a mistake. See, every time there's a dodgy scam, a whole bunch of people get caught investing in by some shyster, that's a complete scam. They'll go to the government demanding things need to change. Don't let other people get caught by this. Then you have all these organizations that are put in place to help protect people that become complacent. Look at ASIC. The example I have personal experience with is the cloud token crypto wallet, which is obviously a scam, and trying to raise awareness of it on the channel, reaching out to all of these organizations, the Federal Police, ASIC, Scam Watch. They didn't care. This is a Malaysian scam, I believe, that was using the registered details of a Tasmanian Launceston address and business to give it legitimacy, saying it's ASIC approved. And I just reached out to a well-known Australian crypto guy, and he didn't give a shit. So, yeah, the false sense of security we have here, at least in that regards. But that's the culture we've got in Australia, so we have to understand that. So these costs are not going to go away. You've got a younger generation that are going to lean more and more towards market interventions from the state down rather than individual responsibility. I can't see that changing for at least a generation or two. And frankly, even then, I don't think it's possible to change in Australia. No essential worker living on their own. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah. Okay. There's the problem. You got to hook up with someone, guys. You need 2 incomes now to buy a house. You're competing with all the people that have 2 incomes. It's not rocket science. This fantasy that you can get a house by yourself with 1 income, it's not a thing anymore. That's not Australia anymore. We have to stop talking like this. This is the price of encouraging complete participation in the workforce, of removing the stigma that's painted on the stay-at-home mom. It's sad in a way. Now, it's no longer a choice. I see it in the homeschooling community. If people want to stay home, if a mother wants to stay home and raise her own children, you have to make sacrifices as a family. And the older you get, the young guys and young ladies may not appreciate this. Once you have kids, it really reframes your entire life. And a lot of stuff you used to think was important, you don't give a crap about anymore. You could want to build up this whole career, and it doesn't mean shit when you have a little baby goo-goo-garing at you. You realize what actually matters in life. And now we're in our country is in such a state where that experience is just impossible for a lot of mothers to achieve, to have. You got to put them in daycare straight away. Remember when we were working with Lorna Jane, one of the PMs there had a preemie baby and was back in work months later, baby in daycare. Partner said, you have to work, can't afford not to. There you go, guys. It's sad. What used to be a last resort for those people in destitution, that's what childcare used to be. It wasn't the norm. Children used to socialize and grow up without it. It was just something that was provided as a service to people in trouble. Now it's painted as everyone has to do it. All these arguments about early childhood education, when you've got children who do parallel play, don't even play together. So, how many of them have abandonment issues? There's not any discussion about that because too many people will feel guilty about it. Because they've got no choice now. So this is where these articles, they piss me off. Australia is not a country anymore where you can buy a house with one income. Unless you're well above average. All the families we've seen in the homeschooling community, because often it's the mum staying at home and the dad working, they make sacrifices. They do without. The petite bourgeoisie would be shocked at what some of the homeschoolers do without to live the lifestyle they choose to. And it's, well, as someone who's recently got his wife back from homeschooling, because we've put our four eldest in school, it still eats up a shitload of time. It's only so many hours where I took him work on projects per day during that, not at night time, which he normally does. Anyway, they can't afford to buy or rent a median-priced home or unit in most areas, Mr. Stevenson said. Well, yes, because they're on their own. There need to be two of them. You're competing with couples. The copper needs to hook up with the nurse. Isn't that the stereotype? At least it was back in the day. Are people still hooking up? For dual-income families with an average gross income of $160,000, purchasing an established home is considered beyond reach, and house and land packages are increasingly out of reach. Well, yeah, because you need to earn more than the average, than $160,000. You know, you need to have two people each. What? Let's have a look here at the ABS stats. You know, what's this? Weekly earnings, public sector for males, the 022. You know, $4,000 each a week. There you go, that's over 200 grand. You need to be two public servants getting together. Hey, two blokes getting together. That's maximizing it, guys. Modern times, 22 plus 22, 4,400 a month. A week, guys. That's what you need. Okay? You're not going to be able to afford here anymore. It's changed. Australia has changed. Sydney has changed. Things are changing. Someone was commenting on a previous video, comparing housing costs back to the 80s, to the early 80s. And I'm going, mate, that's nearly 35 years ago. That's like comparing the 80s to the 50s. It's funny how warped our perception of time is. Okay, Australia has changed a lot since the 80s. Our population has increased. The amenities that we have around our houses has increased. Our cities have changed. The report generated maps with the hotter areas indicating the more unaffordable it is across 12 local government areas in the Greater Sydney, Hunter and Central Coast and Illawarra regions. It used a hypothetical scenario of a family making $120 a year to see what areas they could afford to rent or buy. And I've done this myself too. You can make some really scary looking pictures. What's really fun is to look at a really low income person, like a cafe worker, would have no chance at working at any of these places, or buying or renting themselves. Because here's the reality, guys. If you've got jobs, and we'll talk about this here. I'll jump up. In the video I did yesterday about people not wanting to take $25 an hour, people were commenting going, would you do your job for that? You know, would you work for that? I have worked for that. I did in the past. I have when projects completely went out the window and you were on a contractual fee. You got to do what you got to do, everyone. But you've got to realize those jobs are not a career. You shouldn't expect to be able to be working casually in a coffee shop as a career and buy a house. Okay, if you want to live in that fantasy and think that's possible, fantastic, good on you. But it's not going to lead you. It's not going to lead you. Where's the growth you can get? Maybe you could buy a cafe. Maybe you could build up in that industry in hospitality. It's a bloody hard gig to get into. What about chefs? Where's the room for advancement there? You just go from one venue to the next. Maybe you could get into a better place, but the pay's shit, the hours are terrible. You've got to, when you're making your career choices, maybe this is a failure of our education system and all the guidance counselors giving advice to kids in high school on what career they should do. You've got to think long term. You need to have a career with a progression path. Even the nurses, the cops, all of these public service professions have these career paths. So that's the reality of it. In the state where the median household income is $95,000, yeah, okay, that's the entire state. You're going to have great variety of incomes in, bloody shit kick nowhere part of New South Wales, as opposed to in the heart of the city. The de facto capital of Australia, everyone. The international city that people want to go to, that I would hate to live in. Every time I've gone there, it just feels insane. But then again, you go in there for holiday or for business. The results were stuck. Yeah, of course, because if you're earning 95 grand in Sydney, you're not ready yet to buy a house. You're not at that point in your career to buy a house, in your life to buy a house. What do we really expect? An international city where we keep imposing additional costs and requirements and onerous regulations on our construction sector, because we've decided as a society that's what we want. And frankly, considering the number of disaster issues, if I've got a playlist called Construction on my channel, and we have the triangle of fail that I mentioned in Sydney, different buildings around the city that are just failing. Mascot Towers was one of them. I can't remember the names. Where you'd have high-rises cracking and failing and defects manifesting years later. The entire building's being abandoned. So, we obviously need to impose these regulations and requirements. Here we go. It's not the free market. Uh-oh. We've got to step in. I'd make the argument that you need 3 certifiers on every job. And that's a cost. To ensure that there's agreement between them on any decisions that are made. You need to bring back a clerk of works again, but we don't do it anymore. Anyway, guys. That's the thing. Okay? Imaginary family were totally priced out of Greater Sydney area, except for a few pockets in Western Sydney and Sutherland Shire if they wanted to own their own home. When it came to renting, they could only nab places on the outskirts. Okay, because they're not earning enough. We've always had lower priced parts of cities where people go to find affordable housing. That's not a new thing. Why are we acting like this is unusual? The map became less hot when we looked at renting a unit. However, still, most of it was the orange zone by consuming more than 30% of their total income. And when the analysis moved outside of Sydney, the unfortunate nature of housing didn't let up. Buying a house in Hunter or Central Coast for a family making 120 is largely non-existent, as is the house in the Illawarra Coast. Yeah, you've got to be making more than 120 grand a year if you want to be buying a house, guys. That's the reality of Australia now, particularly in New South Wales. Okay? This is a career stepping stone. As a household, you've got to be earning more than that. That's 2 people on 60 grand. How long, with the viewers of the channel, how long does it take you to earn 60 grand? In more extreme scenarios, for a household on a even higher income of 163, there were only 2 places in the entirety of Sydney that was affordable. They were Liverpool and Penrith. Because Sydney is not an average city. Sydney is an international city. You can't look at what parents paid for a house in the 80s or 70s. Compare 80s or 70s Sydney to Sydney now. They're not the same. Okay? The city may not have moved, but it's grown and changed. Even if essential worker household incomes rose significantly, say to $200,000 per annum, they would still find the dream of home ownership out of reach, the report added. And richer households are also struggling, with the report's authors warning that a family raking in 400 grand every year would still find it difficult to live in an in-demand, affluent area of Manly, Randwick, or inner Sydney. Yes, because this is Sydney. That you could, on this money, you could find places easily around other parts of the country. What you do is you pack up, you move to Queensland. There you go. Then you fly back for your work if you have to once a month. That would be cheaper than buying in Sydney and sticking yourself with debt. Why the hell aren't people doing that? Oh, no, I want to be close to mum and dad so I can drive with the shit traffic. You can fly. They'll retire and piss off to Harvey Bay anyway. The housing affordability crisis of 2024 is strikingly similar to the crisis of 2007, but with one critical difference: it's worse, the report warned. The researchers blamed the New South Wales government for its heavy-handedness in dishing out property-related fees and charges, which accounts for almost half of its $45.8 billion tax and royalty revenue in the latest state budget. There you go, guys. There you go. And people think we're not an overtaxed country here. Oh, shit, there's some stupid people out there. Oh, well, no, that's... Maybe there are. Maybe that's just the answer. They also warned against the oversimplification of calling for higher wages for essential workers. For wage increases to have a meaningful impact, they would need to be both substantial and significant over time. However, that kind of wage growth required to match the steep rise in housing prices over the past decade is unlikely, the report added. So let's have a talk about this, everyone. So the report is putting the blame on the huge amount of government taxes, costs, and impositions that are on our housing sector across all sections. We're just going to see that continue. I'm very skeptical for arguments that it's going to change. Wage growth isn't going to keep up with it. You need to pair off. And you need to be in a career with which has a growth projection. I mean, honestly, why the hell are you buying in Sydney when you can't afford it? Buy somewhere else or move. If you're a nurse or a copper, there's plenty of other opportunities around the country. Move for other opportunities. That's what people did in the past. My father moved to the other side of the world. That's what people did all the time. Maybe that's another thing to ask. Are we too sedentary these days? People are complaining they can't buy a house in the suburb they grew up in when their parents got it for, 20 grand back in the day. Yeah, when it was a field in the middle of nowhere, they probably still had a cart coming past and collecting the toilet. I don't know, guys. I'm just frustrated at seeing this constantly in the media because I'm concerned that this is going to agitate and radicalize people to call for more government interventions, and then we'll get pushed for things like shared equity and shared ownership coming down, and that's just going to make it even worse. It's going to make it worse. What do you think, guys? Let me know your thoughts on the comments below. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.